We're live.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here this evening. We really appreciate the time you're taking to join us. I just want to give everybody a quick reminder about the format we're using for the session. We are using a webinar format. In order to engage in the conversation, you have two ways to do that. One, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A tab. If you are not in full screen, you will not see the Q&A tab. So what you need to do is go to the three dots, which are more, and you will find the Q&A tab there. Write in your question. We will be monitoring that tab, and we will be sure to read your question and answer it. We would appreciate it if you also provided us with your name along with the question. Another way to engage is to raise your hand. You're all familiar with that if you've attended many of the Board of Selectmen's meetings. That raise your hand is at the bottom of the screen. And if you raise your hand, we will promote you as a panelist. That means we will bring you into the room where we're having the discussion. You can ask your question. Again, we would appreciate it if you would identify yourself to everybody that is listening in to this meeting. And then once we have concluded our conversation regarding your question, we will put you back into the session as an attendee. So I know that was a mouthful, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood how we were going to conduct the meeting. So I wanted to, this evening is the first information session of the Housing Task Force. I know that there are a lot of different perspectives in this room or on this webinar regarding housing in Dover. And that is exactly why we believe the conversation we're going to have is so important. Just by way of background, I want to remind everybody that this task force was formed in 2023 to help Dover take a much more proactive approach to housing. We felt it was really important that we needed to be proactive. We needed to understand where we were today and how we're going to plan for our future. And that's the operative word. It's our future. This is all of us. We need your input. In 2023, when the committee was first formed, we spent a lot of time, what we called improving some of the infrastructure that we had. We created a web page. We created checklists for the various kinds of housing that we were mandated to provide, and then we moved towards what we envisioned to be the very exciting part of this process, hiring a consultant and beginning the outreach, beginning to create our toolbox. And that's where we are today. So before I move on, let me tell you who's on this committee. Next slide, please. So the committee has members of all the land use departments. It also has town staff. And I would like to thank all the town staff that participate on this committee. It has been an extremely productive and fun task force to be on. We also needed to hire a consultant because, believe it or not, all of us members and the staff didn't have all the expertise that we needed to move this project forward properly. And we went out with an RFP, and we decided on hiring the Barrett Planning Group, and they have joined us this evening. And they have been a tremendous asset in the 3 months we've been working with them. And they have really provided us with a phenomenal framework by which to get the answers we need and the tools we need for Dover. Next slide, please. So today really marks the next phase in the process. This is our timeline. We are right here starting to put together our toolbox. And you are going to hear this a lot this evening. In order for us to have a toolbox that works for our community, we need to know what you want. So community engagement is one of the most important things. If you are bashful about an idea and you don't want to present it at this forum or future forums, send an email to any of us on the task force, go to the townhouse, meet with Melissa. We want to hear all your ideas so that we can incorporate everyone's opinion. Keep in mind that Dover is all of our towns, and we really need to start this conversation together. Tonight is the beginning of this really important opportunity for us to share what we've been working on, and more importantly, for us to hear from you. As we move into this conversation, this really important conversation, I want to take a few minutes to ground us on what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. This task force is all about developing Dover's future together. At a high level, development is not something that we can stop, but it is something that we can shape. And that's what this effort is all about. We all value, all of us in this community, what makes Dover special. It's our open space, the natural setting, the feeling that development is there, but not dominant. That is something I believe this town is trying to protect. At the same time, we are missing options, housing options, whether it is for older residents who want to stay, younger people starting out, town employees, or simply families just looking for flexibility. We need to be realistic. We have requirements at a state level around affordable housing that are not optional, and we need to respond to those requirements within our own control. Our plan in Dover cannot be simply to ignore. We need to work together and determine what we want for our future. And that is why your voice matters. It is important for us to hear from you. This process will only work if we all work together for all the residents of Dover. Next slide. And maybe, the best way to bring all this together is to step back, take a second, and talk about what really matters. So we all know change is coming, whether we plan for it or not. And doing nothing is still a choice. It simply means that we are not the ones shaping Dover, others are. If we stay reactive, development is going to happen in ways that perhaps don't reflect what we value as a community. However, if we are proactive, we can guide that change and protect the character of our town at the same time. Community input defines this outcome, and ultimately the outcome is going to be defined by all of you if you are willing to engage with us. So, next slide, please. As we embark upon this process, I also want to reflect upon what we have learned. Over the past several years, there has been much outreach regarding accessory dwelling units, the MBTA Communities Act, which we were required to pass, and we did at town meeting. And what we learned from all of that outreach were three simple things. One, residents like living in Dover, but many of them cannot stay due to financial restraints, perhaps house size. It's just too much for them to stay in a large house and take care of a large property. Other options relate to single family, where or other options are when families begin to downsize and they need more than simply single family homes. So what we are looking to do here is to think about multifamily housing or townhouses or smaller homes, things that may be appealing and valuable for individuals in town. However, the most important thing is we want to make sure that these kinds of multifamily homes fit in with what all of us cherish most about Dover. And it may be naive, but all of us sitting on this community believe that we can accomplish both. We can provide diversification in our housing stock, as well as maintain what we all love about Dover. So tonight is all about starting this conversation. It's about us hearing from you. It's about us learning what makes Dover special to all of you, so that when we put together a plan and a toolbox, it is going to reflect our community as a whole. So thank you all for attending tonight. This is, as we mentioned, one of, I think, the first 3 information sessions. I am now going to turn it over to the Barrett Group, who is going to talk a little bit about the framework, what we've done, how can you engage, and some of the other ideas that we have as we roll out this project.
Okay, I think that means it's my turn. So I'm
It is, Judy.
Judy Barrett with Barrett Planning Group. Just to go over the agenda a little bit, we have information to share, and also looking forward to a discussion with all of you at a little time later in this meeting. We want to kind of just go through some data that we have looked at to try to understand sort of demographics of where Dover is and in relation to the region, looking at your housing market, understanding the opportunities, and frankly, some of the limitations embedded in that market. We also looked at kind of the constraints on housing development in the community, some of which are regulatory. There are also environmental considerations that are very important to your town, that in some cases relate to why you have the regulations that you do. And then also thinking about the ways in which local capacity comes to bear on being able to develop a housing roadmap, as we're calling it, and then also carrying it out. So capacities, things like staff, volunteer time, technology, and, just things of that nature. So we've tried to kind of get a handle on that as well. The highlight of the night is really not listening to us. It's actually talking with you and hearing from you. So there is going to be a time for group discussion. Intermittently, there will also be some polls where we want to ask you some questions and kind of get a sense of what people think in the group. And then before the meeting ends, we'll talk about kind of our next steps. This is sort of the first meeting of a series of 3. So we're looking forward to not only tonight, but also being able to re-engage with people in subsequent meetings. Next slide. I think you already know this is set up as a webinar, so please, just to reiterate what was said earlier, use the question and answer feature if you have questions. We're not going to use the chat this evening. We do have the live polling feature, as we said, and the whole point of this is for us to understand what you want so we can help you build a roadmap that's going to work for you. Next slide. I think we have a
Great.
poll.
Yeah.
John Charles, I think you're on now.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a few polls for everyone today, and I'm going to start off just reading each one of them individually, and then you'll have a pop-up on your screen asking the same questions. So the first question is, how comfortable are you talking about housing? This is on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being not comfortable, 5 being very comfortable. Next, we want to know your affiliation to Dover. You can pick multiple options for this, so please pick any that apply, as well as what brought you to Dover first. And again, this is also multiple choice, so please pick any that resonate with you. Next, we have a question. What do you think the median sales price for a single family home in Dover was in 2025? Another question about what percentage of total land area in Dover is zoned for single-family residential. And then what do you want to learn more about Dover? Is it the demographics, the housing market, the environmental factors? Let us know. And
All
I think
right,
now we
so,
can
I'm
launch.
going to go ahead and launch the poll. So you all should see it come up on your screen. And then we'll go over the answers once people have answered. So again, there are 6 questions. John Charles just read them all to you, and you should be able to scroll down. If you're having any trouble using the poll feature and I know that the Q&A feature is intended for you to be able to ask us questions, but you're also welcome to put your answers in there. We'll be the only ones to see them, but we'll make sure that, for purposes of reporting out, we incorporate your responses there as well. So again, if you're having any trouble using the polling feature in front of you, feel free to use the Q&A too. Give another minute. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that have come into the Q&A. And so the first one is just, have we been given the first poll question so far or all of them? I only saw the first. So you should be able to scroll down. And if not, if you only answered one question, no worries. But again, the first question was just, again, asking about how comfortable are you talking about housing on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very comfortable. The second question was asking about your affiliation to Dover. The third was asking what brought you to Dover. And then there were actually kind of a couple trivia questions about the median sales price for a single family home, the percentage of land zoned for single family, And then we just wanted your feedback about the topics that we're discussing tonight, what you want to learn more about. So again, no worries if you weren't able to answer all of them. But I did just want to kind of clarify that. Somebody else asked, not sure what that means. How comfortable are you talking about housing, such as knowledge of housing laws? And honestly, we intended for that to be kind of broad. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable talking about housing, maybe because they don't feel like they have a lot of kind of technical familiarity with some of the pieces, such as state frameworks behind housing development, or other factors that are going to kind of come into play from a technical standpoint. But sometimes it's also just it's a subject that people often feel passionately about. And so it's really kind of broad. And then I think those are the ones that we'll just answer live for now. Somebody asked how many Dover residents are attending this meeting tonight. So in a moment, we will share the results, and then we'll see. There are on the participant side, I'll have to double check right now, because I do know there are 25 attendees. I'm not sure how many of them are Dover residents, but again, hopefully the poll will give us some insight there. So I'm going to go ahead, John Charles, and stop the poll, and then just let you kind of go ahead and go over the responses.
Sounds good.
So you all should be able, I've just hit share results. So on your screen, you should be able to scroll down. And I'll just let you go ahead, John Charles.
Sure. Yeah, so for the first question about your comfort level talking about housing, it looks like we have a good cohort of people who feel very comfortable. That's great to hear, as well as a few people who are less so comfortable. And we're hoping, this presentation appeals to people at all comfort levels. What is your affiliation to Dover? It looks like primarily a lot of people are residents and they own their home in Dover. Also, a few people work in Dover. A few people with children have their children attending school, as well as one person visiting Dover often. In terms of what brought you to Dover, it looks like half of you want to raise a family here. Another few people wanted to move here from a previous home in another community. And then we can talk about the trivia questions. So the data we saw in 2025, the average median sales price for a single family home was 1.6 million. So for those 4 people who answered between 1.5 and 1.75, you got it. In terms of what is the percentage of total land area in Dover that is zoned for single family residential, it's more than 95%. So anyone who said over 80% got it right. And then, yeah, for the last question, seems like there's a broad interest in what people want to learn more: demographics, housing, environmental, and local regulations. So we'll all touch upon each of these topics later in the presentation. And with that, we can jump into the key data section of this presentation. So we really want to provide some data points and context for understanding housing in Dover. And we're going to start with a demographic profile of the town. So kind of looking broadly at the town, Dover has been growing since at least 1930 in terms of population. We saw a faster growth rate between 1950 and 1970, and more moderate growth since then. As of 2024, the population is 5,930. And one thing to note here is also the population density of Dover. So Dover has a density of 392 people per square mile, which is in contrast to Norfolk County as a whole, where the overall density is 1,800 people per square mile. In terms of population age, we see that the average age in Dover is 45 years, which is slightly higher than the county's average of 41 years. If we break it out, as this chart does to the right of the slide, we see that compared to the county, Dover has a larger proportion of older adults, 45 to 64 years of age, and lower in terms of younger adults, looking at 25 to 44 years of age. Um, Also notable is that in terms of school-age children, 5 to 17, there's a larger proportion compared to the county. We can also look at households in terms of data, and one thing we want to consider is the tenure. So in Dover, over 98% of the population in Dover are homeowners. Only 2% are renters, and this is in contrast to Norfolk County, where it's about 2/3 of residents are homeowners, and in the state where it's just under 2/3. We can also look at household in terms of size, so how many people are living in a housing unit. In Dover, the average household is about 3, whereas the county average is lower at 2.5. You'll notice in this graph that in Norfolk County as a whole, 27% of households are one-person households. In Dover, this proportion is much smaller at 8%. Dover also has a larger proportion of 4-person or 5-person households as well. This is related to this next topic, household type, as Dover has 88% of households being family and 11.5% being non-family. So a small proportion of households are non-family, and this is typically where one-person households are counted. You can also see that compared to the county, it's a much smaller proportion of non-families are in Dover compared to the county at just 1/3, and same for the state as well. When we look at the median household income of Dover, we see that it's over $250,000. And the census doesn't report beyond that in terms of median household income. So we also consult the mean average household income, which gives us a better picture of the average income in this community. So here we see that the mean average income is over $400,000. We can see also that this varies a lot by household type. So on the chart, you see that family household income is significantly higher than non-family household income. And there's also a big disparity when you compare it to Norfolk County as a whole. One thing we also look at is employment data from Dover. So here you can see that about 1/5 of the workforce in Dover are employed in professional, scientific, and technical services, as well as finance, insurance, and real estate industries. These tend to be higher income workers, or industries that have higher income workers, and it's notable compared to the Massachusetts percentages. We also looked at the percentage of workers that work from home, and Dover was unique in the sense that over 1/3 of workers worked from home. This is important to consider given this might influence housing preferences in your town. And it's larger too compared to the county and the state. One thing we think about also when it comes to housing is cost-burdened households. So here, cost burden means that households spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. For severely cost-burdened households, this percentage is 50%. You can see on the graph to the right that households that are below the regional average median family income tend to have higher rates of cost burden. And it's also important to note, however, that 81% of households in Dover fit in that top bar that's greater than the average regional median family income. So while it is a significant burden for the bottom segments of the income spectrum, it's also kind of a small proportion of Dover's households. One data point we can also look at is in school enrollment. So as this graph illustrates, the school enrollment for the K through 5 in Dover and Sherborne have both been decreasing over time. And this trend will eventually be reflected in the Dover Sherborne middle school and high school grades here. We also noted that an estimated third of Dover's school-age population attends a private school compared to the county as a whole, which was more closer to 1/4. So that concludes that portion. I'm going to hand it off to Alexis to speak to the housing market.
Great. Thank you, John Charles. I'm actually just going to pause for a moment. Melissa, town planner, can just answer some of the questions that have come up in the Q&A, and then we will launch into the housing market section. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you, Alexis. Just noticed 2 questions here that were somewhat similar. One question is, how is the land under conservation easements in Dover handled in percentage of land zoned for single family? And the second question that says, if 35% of Dover land is conserved, it's impossible to have 95% zoned for single family homes. What we need to do is make a distinction between the zoning of a particular parcel of land and that land having a conservation easement or restriction on it. So this question was related purely to zoning. By looking at the zoning map and looking at the zoning districts here in the community, what are those percentages? So that doesn't take into account something that's encumbering that property through an easement or restriction. It was a straight zoning calculation. And there's another 2 questions that are related to the Q&A is not functional on a phone, and please enable the chat so this can actually be interactive. So we are going to get into some discussion at the end where folks that are joining us here as attendees will be able to ask questions, raise their hands, and be recognized. And just looking at the attendees, it doesn't look like we have anyone on here that's on a phone. It looks like everyone is joined on the webinar. So hopefully that's not an issue for anyone. Thank you, Alexis.
Sure, no problem. And as we're going through the content, I know it's a lot to digest. These slides will be available on the project page, but in addition, if anything comes up that we're presenting content-wise, or you realize there's something that you'd like to learn more about in relation to any topic that we discuss, we're just doing a very, very high-level overview of all of these topics tonight. So please feel free to use the Q&A. It might not be something that gets answered live tonight, but when we take away from the meeting and look at all the questions that have been submitted, we will use that to inform additional kind of data points that we look to and share out for the town. So I just want to encourage you to continue to use that Q&A. All right, so I'm going to talk briefly about the housing market. And so this is an important consideration because it's going to have large implications for the cost of housing and the types of housing that are likely to get built in the community, even if regulatory considerations and environmental considerations were not at play. The larger housing market as well is going to affect the likelihood of certain types of housing being built. So just as a general overview of the housing stock, there are an estimated roughly 2,000 housing units in Dover. And as we had previously pointed out, most of them are owner occupied. So I will be talking a little bit more in detail about single family homes specifically, since that is the predominant housing type. But just to kind of go over the most common styles, colonial style homes, Cape style homes, and mansions are the 3 most common building types represented among Dover's housing supply. So just to give I know this table here looks pretty complex, so let me just walk you through it. The difference between the numbers that I just showed, the numbers that I showed on the previous slide came from American Community Survey estimates. So it's census data. The data on this slide is actually much more locally sourced. It is from your assessor's records. So I really enjoy being able to really get a closer handle on a community's housing profile from the assessor's records, because it is really just the direct data source. So we looked at just how the properties are assessed. And so properties are given a land use code. And so many of the properties are assessed as single family. So that's 1,850 properties. But then there are also properties that are assessed as condominiums, a small number of two-family homes, and then a lot of mixed use that is actually just might, from a building type standpoint, appear to be, say, a single family home, but it is assessed under Chapter 61, 61A, 61B, which relates to kind of a tax relief for properties that are in either agricultural use or as forested land or for recreational land. So regardless of the housing type that might be on one of those properties, it's not going to be included in your single family parcel data as the assessor looks at it. So that's why we did separate it out there. And then there are also quite a number of parcels that are assessed as multiple homes on one parcel. Again, you might actually think of those really as single family homes. There's a variety of reasons something might be assessed that way. It might be, a larger estate that has, for example, a carriage house. It might be from an accessory dwelling unit, a guest house. There's all sorts of reasons why it might be assessed that way. But by and large, those properties are typically really single family homes as the predominant, the primary residence on that property. And then there is one property that is assessed as an apartment. So just for clarity, these are all of the residential use parcels. So there are other types of buildings, other properties as well, but these are the properties that are residential use. So that first column is just talking about the total number of properties within the town. And then we also like to look over time at the change in parcel count over time. So the numbers that you see highlighted in this kind of yellow color, those are the largest values within largest assessed values within each of the columns, and the blue are the smallest numbers. So the parcel count change over the 20-year period, there was the greatest increase in single family home properties over that 20-year period. Now, interestingly, the number of building permits for single family homes is actually slightly higher than that, but some of that is due to the fact that some of those building permits for single family homes might actually be tied to a demolition and rebuild. So it's actually, it's pretty common for that to be the case, that the building permit data for single family might outpace what you see in the parcel change count. The condominium count change increased by 29. Interestingly, one of the developments that is assessed as condominiums from a building perspective, they appear as single family homes. So you might see them and think of them as single family homes, but they may actually be included for assessment purposes within the condominium properties. So over that 20-year period, there was a loss of a few two-family properties. Oftentimes, and it does appear to be the case for at least a couple properties, what's actually happening there is what a property that is at one point used as, say, a two-family residence, where it's owner occupied, and then they might rent out the other unit. When the unit gets put up for sale, someone might purchase it and make improvements and then actually sell them as condominiums. So that does appear to have been the case for a couple of properties. It does look like over the 20-year period, there was kind of a fairly substantial number of properties that were previously assessed as mixed-use properties that have now, we can't track by parcel which properties it applies to from the data that we use, but there was a pretty substantial drop in properties that were considered mixed-use largely under Chapter 61. And then the median assessed value, again, the blue there is representing the lowest value, and the yellow is representing the highest value. It is important to note, though, when you think about, even though that yellow is highlighted down here for apartments, that's not really, it's not a per unit highest value, because that particular property is 34 units. So while that overall property has the highest assessed value, on per unit basis, that's going to be your single family homes. For the median years built, the median year for all residential properties is around 1970. But when you look at it kind of across the different types, you can see some kind of interesting differences there. Those multiple homes on one parcel that I mentioned, quite a few of them are likely to be kind of larger estates that have, carriage homes, guest homes, things like that. They are actually typically quite older. And so you'll see that on a map I'm about to show you as well. And so for the age of housing stock, I know it's a little harder. Hopefully when we have this in a printed report, the colors will be a little bit more clear than they are right now. But the really light colors are your older residential structures. And so you can see that a lot of those are tied to those larger lot properties. And so a lot of those are definitely older, whereas you can see the kind of darker, those represent newer structures. And so you can see that's kind of in, where that applies in these subdivision neighborhoods over time. But the older properties, by and large, are often on these larger properties. So in terms of the permitting, so because most of your development is single family homes, that is where the vast majority of your actual building permits that are issued come from. So this chart here is looking at the building permits by building type. And you can see that over this period, in any given year, most of the new units that are created are coming from single family 1-unit structures. And then the one blip here, this in yellow, is where we have in 2023 the creation of the 34-unit rental development. So that created 34 units there. But otherwise, most of your new units that have been created over this 20-year period have really been tied to single family 1-unit structures. So I did mention that I wanted to go a little bit more in detail about single family homes in particular, because that is the vast majority of your residential building types. And so, I'm just going to go back there. Sorry about that. So the middle column that you see there is looking at all of your single family homes with one caveat. We actually did remove, for purposes of this slide, we took out the handful of units that are included on the SHI. Because if we're talking about the assessed value, it is going to be lower for a home that is deed restricted as an affordable home, because the ability to sell that property is tied to its affordability to a household at a certain income level. So we just wanted to remove those for purposes of this slide. That's why you might see some tiny differences in like the median year built from the previous slide, because several properties were removed for this. But I want to draw your attention to the middle column first, because this is just taking all of your single family homes, removing those few deed restricted ones, and just kind of looking at some, general trends we can look at. But then I'm going to compare it to homes that are in your lower quartile in terms of assessed value and your upper quartile. And the reason is, when we take out those deed restricted properties and we look at the lower quartile value properties, in many communities that can represent what you may call your naturally affordable housing stock. But as you'll see, in a community with such high property values, even that lower quartile segment of your single family homes is not really truly affordable. But there still are some very interesting differences I just want to point out to you. But again, first, if we just look at all of the single family homes minus the deed restriction, the properties that are subject to a deed restriction, the median assessed value is about $1.4 million. And the median lot size in acres is about 1.2 acres. So again, thinking back to that map where I showed you, there are some properties, if I were to do an average, it's quite different, because there are properties that have much, much larger lot sizes within there. So the average is quite a bit higher, but the median is about 1.2 acres. We like to look at the ratio of your building value to your land value, because what that may signify is, especially for older properties, if there is a home that goes on the market and the building is not in great shape, it might be older, smaller, whatever, might reduce its value compared to the land, that is much more likely to be in a market like Dover's to be purchased and perhaps really improved upon, expanded, et cetera, or torn down and a new unit rebuilt. And so then that is going to no longer be in that lower quartile. But so we do like to look at the ratio of the building value to the land value. So a ratio of around 1 means the building and the land hold about equal value. But when the value is much lower than 1, that means the building isn't really holding much value. It's not going to be something that someone with a lot of purchasing power might hold on to. They're probably really interested in buying the property for its land, and then might build something newer that kind of meets their what they're looking for. We also look at, again, the year built, the square footage, and then the most common styles. And then I think one of the things that's really important to look at is how many have been in the same owner's hands for a long time. So when you look at all of your single family homes, the percentage that haven't sold since before 2000, it's around an estimated 12%. But now if you look at those lower quartile properties, you're kind of maybe more attainable properties in a different kind of housing market. There's smaller lot size, and that the building value is really not holding much. They are older and then much smaller. They're also much more likely to be ranch homes. And then this is really interesting because when we hear that there's potentially a lot of homeowners who can't downsize, and we see that there are these properties that have been held by the same owner for a long time, there's much higher percentage of your kind of lower quartile properties that have been in the same owner's hands for a long time. So that very well could be a lot of those homeowners that we hear about who don't have a place to go. There's really nowhere for them to move to in Dover. They might not be able to afford something. And what would they downsize into anyway? And then when you look at kind of those upper quartile properties, not surprisingly, larger lot size, higher value. A lot more of the value is actually tied to the building because you're creating these much larger, newer single family homes that are much more likely to be assessed for style as a mansion. And then they are much less likely to have been in the same owner's hands for a long time. So in terms of the, also looking at the single family housing, my colleague had previously discussed the single family median sales price within Dover, but we like to look at the median sales prices kind of in conjunction with the number of sales in any given year. So when you look, the red line here is indicating the number of single family home sales each year over time. And then the blue is just indicating the median sale price. So there's actually been, it's not too surprisingly, as the property values go up, often that kind of, it's going to kind of create a little bit of constraint there. So there's, a blip in the number of sales, but then, it's with a little bit of variation in there. So when we look at the condominium properties, the median sales price is considerably lower than the single family homes in Dover, but still, quite high for a household. It's certainly not a starter home price for those condominiums. And so that's just something to consider in terms of who's able to move to the community. There was a pretty big spike in the condominium sales in 1993 around that area, just tied to a particular development at that time. Lastly, I just want to speak to the current subsidized housing inventory, which represents the list of properties in a community that meets the standards for lower moderate income housing under Chapter 40B. So there's very specific standards that a project must meet to be considered eligible for the SHI. So if a community has some kind of more naturally affordable housing, or you might even have deed restricted housing that for one reason or another does not meet the requirements of the SHI. But I do want to speak to the properties that you do currently have on your subsidized housing inventory in Dover. So under Chapter 40B, there is the state's established target that each community will have 10% of its total housing stock considered lower moderate income housing that meets the standards of the subsidized housing inventory. So currently in Dover, it's 2.82%. And then aside from Dover Farms, most of these are located near the Dover Walpole municipal boundary. But when we look at the types of projects that you have on your subsidized housing inventory, 3 of them are ownership projects. So County Court, Dover Village, and Dover Farms, those are all ownership projects. And so when you see those on the SHI, you know those are all affordable because for ownership, only the deed restricted projects go on to the SHI. So County Court and Dover Farms, that just represents 25% of their total units. But they are the ones that are on the SHI are deed restricted as affordable. Whereas for rental, as long as 25% are considered affordable, all of the rental units go on. So I did actually look to check for Red Robin pastures because sometimes it is actually higher than 25% for a project. But so 25% of that 34 total units are actually deed restricted as affordable. The other are considered market rate units. So that is just a snapshot of your current subsidized housing inventory. And the reason the DDS group homes, it indicates that it's 0. Those are treated a little bit differently. Every couple of years, DDS, Department of Developmental Services, or DMH, if a community has Department of Mental Health group homes, they report the total units in a community in aggregate to EOHLC, and those often kind of vary over time for various reasons. So at one point, you may have had a group home that had some units for DDS clientele. And as of the last time they reported to EOHLC, that was not the case. So that is just a snapshot, broadly speaking, of the housing market as it currently stands. And I am going to move on to housing constraints to my colleague, Tony.
Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, so I'll go over a couple of slides on town regulations and zoning that influence housing developmental patterns. So I won't go through the entire town bylaw, but only those few that most affect the processes and under which housing development must follow in Dover. Next slide. So Dover has several local land use regulations as authorized by the state, with the purpose of protecting community and environmental health and safety. However, some of these regulations contain additional provisions and language that mandate greater setbacks than minimums required by the state, and this results in increased physical distances between residential structures and encourages oversized lots. And so some of those setbacks include those found in the wetlands bylaw under Chapter 181, the bylaw on septic systems, as well as the bylaw on private wells. And so, while some of these provisions and setbacks are reasonable in protecting the health and safety of the community and the environments, and are not exactly unique to Dover, but it is the lack of infrastructure, specifically public water and sewer, that is primarily why these regulations become a larger hurdle for developing housing. And so, with no municipal sewer or public water infrastructure, that means it means that every development has to provide its own wells and its own septic systems. And so that triggers, these associated regulatory reviews. And then compounded with the setbacks that are higher than, what's required by the state law, it significantly limits what areas can be developed. And so, when you zoom out, you know, looking at Dover, there's not a lot of development of, smaller single family homes or compact neighborhoods or, housing diversity in general, which would promote naturally affordable housing, as Alexis mentioned earlier. And then looking at the procedural side of things, so there are so many different rules and regulations, and requiring different permits that are granted by different boards. It's not very streamlined, and so that potentially introduces a lot of confusion on both sides, both on the town, the board, and on the development side as well. Next slide. All right, and as far as zoning goes, there are some prohibitive standards that limit housing diversity. So allowing only single family homes by right, having large minimum lot sizes in each of the residential districts. And this is seen commonly in other communities in Massachusetts. So again, not entirely unique to Dover, but it is restrictive nonetheless. But there are a few things that are somewhat unique to Dover. So one being the perfect square rule in residential zoning districts, which requires that a lot has to be large enough to contain a perfect square that matches that zoning district's frontage requirement. So in the R1 district, for example, the lot has to have 150 feet of frontage. So that is um, the length alongside the road. Um, yeah, of like the lot bordering the road, so that has to be 150 feet, and then the lot has to be capable of containing a perfect square that matches that length, so 150 feet by 150 feet square. And if that square crosses any boundary on the lot, then it does not pass zoning. And so that it essentially establishes, the minimum width and length of the lot, but it also prevents narrow and irregularly shaped lots as well. And please note these drawings are not based on any real lots. They were only drawn to illustrate the concept of the perfect square in the most simplest way. Then next on can you go back? Um, so on multifamily zoning, and development in general, there are three legal pathways really in Dover to develop multifamily housing. So they are the RM districts, the recently adopted MBTA overlay district, and um, as many of you know, the Chapter 40B. And so the recently adopted MBTA district is, really the only local multifamily district that really is in effect. And that really covers existing condo development. The RM multifamily districts exists in the bylaw, but it is not mapped. And so that actually makes Dover non-compliant with State Chapter 48, which requires that all zoning districts be mapped. Um, but that is a different conversation. And because the RM district is not mapped, any multifamily development that wants to follow the RM zoning rules becomes an arduous process, with additional steps. And so, that being a local multifamily project has to first submit a plan to the planning board, has to go through town meeting, and then obviously has to be approved at town meeting to rezone that site as an RM district, and then the developer must seek the permit from the planning board afterwards. So instead of applying only for a special permit, as in most communities, multifamily projects has to go through, the town meeting and these additional steps before even seeking a permit from the planning board. And so, with all that said, there had been no multifamily development under this district, and there had not been, and as a result, there has not been a sufficient creation of any affordable units under this district as well, because it is the only district in Dover that has an inclusionary zoning provision. Um, and so yeah, with that, all that said, all recent multifamily development has been 40B projects that operate under state law and bypass local zoning. So, and really, the town local zoning really provides no or very little incentive to develop diverse housing. So, which would be at a closer scale to, the existing neighborhoods, or that may be better aligned with what the community wants. But, because it just has no incentive for developers to create multifamily under that local zoning. They go through 40B instead. And so that's where we're at.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So now we'll get into some environmental factors to consider in relation to housing. I'm going to go through this section a bit quickly, but as my colleague Alexis had mentioned, these slides will be up on the website later, so feel free to look more again when they're up. So next slide, please. Yeah, we just want to visualize some environmental factors here, so you get a sense of what's happening in Dover. So first we're looking at open space protections. Some areas are have limited protections. A lot of Dover, as you can see, has protections in perpetuity. So when it comes to housing, like those are kind of off limits. There's also Chapter 61, 61A, and 61B lands, which are meant to protect agricultural, recreational, and other types of uses like that. So that's also a consideration. We know that drinking water is an important factor too when it comes to housing. So this map just shows all the drinking water wells that are in town, as well as the water main that Aquarian Water Company provides. So you can see that in the south and kind of near the townhouse area as well. Other things to note here are protections for the Title V setback. Which you can see on this map, as well as wellhead protection areas, which are meant to protect groundwater from pollutants and things of that nature. One thing to note as well in Dover is that there are two groundwater protection districts. So that's what this map here is illustrating. And that just requires additional steps in permitting, which also need to be considered for housing. Next, we have wetland protections. Massachusetts has the Wetlands Protection Area that regulates areas to surround like areas near wetlands. So this is just what this map is showing here, the you know distribution of wetlands in Dover and the buffer to consider for development. And then this map is more of a summary of some of the things I just mentioned. These are factors that highly constrain what is possible in these parts of town. So we have open space protected in perpetuity. We have the Zone 1 wellheads, which protect the groundwater source, as well as priority habitats, regulatory floodway, which shouldn't be built upon, and slope, which is a factor for development on the financial side, as well as for siting different housing. So, yeah, that is kind of a quick summary of the environmental factors. We just talked in this presentation about the demographic profile of Dover, the housing market dynamics, the regulatory landscape, and the environment. And so now we really want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about Dover and housing? So, oh, and I forgot about this section. We also wanted to briefly talk about local capacity. So, just to highlight that the town is taking a proactive approach to housing. And I think the Dover Housing Task Force is evidence of that. Dover also produced a housing production plan in 2022, which goes through this year. So that's also a product that will help assess the needs and ways forward for addressing Dover's housing needs. one thing we also wanted to mention was a lot of other communities have supports like a local housing authority or affordable housing trust, which also seeks to address, housing choice and diversity in communities. Dover also has not adopted the Community Preservation Act, but this is a program through the state that can provide funding for housing preservation efforts. So that's also something to consider here when we talk about the capacity for Dover related to housing. So now you've heard these different aspects of housing, from the demographics to the housing market. And now we're going to open this up for a group discussion. Here are just some norms to keep in mind. Just to please share your name before speaking, to be respectful of others. After you leave today, share the lessons learned, not necessarily the personal stories. And this is also the first of multiple engagements, so keep that in mind as well. Judy, would you like to go through the discussion questions?
Certainly, happy to do that. So I think the first question we'd like to throw out for people to respond to is what kind of housing is missing in Dover? I think I'd rather kind of go through these one at a time than to go through the whole list. But just so you know, we're going to be asking about examples you see in other communities that you kind of like or don't like, what's special about Dover today, what should be preserved, and so forth. But let's just sort of start with what kind of housing do you think is missing in Dover now?
And again, remember, there are a few different ways where you can participate in this conversation, which is
Right.
really important to us. If you raise your hand, we'll bring you in
Yep.
and we can talk about it. Or if you prefer just to give your answer on the Q&A, you can do that. But we're really interested to know from the 25 attendees, even one of you, what kind of housing do you think is missing today in Dover?
So we do have a Q&A question here. Does Dover have a designated historic district that would control demolition, construction, et cetera?
Take that one, Judy.
Local experts. Thank you.
Currently, thank you for the question, Chris. We do not have a historic district here in Dover. We do, however, have a demolition delay bylaw, which is regulated by the Historic Commission. That particular bylaw obviously has various caveats. And if the commission does decide to take jurisdiction over a structure that has historical significance in their opinion, it's a 1-year delay and is not purely age. There needs to be some significance to that particular structure. Important thing to note is the bylaw does not prohibit demolition. All it can do is delay it. Great question. Thank you.
And that's true of demolition delay around the state as well. What kind of housing is missing in Dover?
You raise your hand, we'll recognize you. We'd love to hear from you.
Elderly housing was one type of housing that's missing in town. Other thoughts? Sierra Bright has raised a hand.
Sierra, if you want to unmute, you should be able to talk now.
Sorry, that took me a minute. I just want to be sure that everybody understands that Dover has limited water supply, and that should really be at the root of any talk of development of any kind. So I'm concerned about talk about greater density and more housing, basically. I kind of feel there should be a moratorium on any construction because of the very limited water supply. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Other thoughts about what's missing? Yes, we have another hand raised here.
Hi, this is Simone Azevedo. I think one of the challenges with like the types of housing that we are missing here would be more related to multifamily houses and smaller units that could be affordable. And I don't want to put a label. I know we have like some areas that are smaller.
Yeah.
Having said that, we also, at least the people that I interact in Dover have been concerned about the same things that I am, which is you raise your kids here and then they want to stay, but affording a single family house for them is much more difficult. Therefore, eventually, changing or having the opportunity to make your single family into a multi-family house, pretty much keeping even the same amount of people, could be very helpful from my point of view and from some of the discussions that I have had before. I also heard several times people who would voice the importance of having places for people who work for the town to be able to live here instead of being commuting every single day or making it impossible to even stay nearby.
Thank you.
Simone, can I ask a follow-up question? When you think about the types of housing that's missing, how do you reconcile the two with keeping Dover's character the way it is? Like, do you believe that there's a way for us to have both, basically?
Yeah, I actually do. I think when the first time that I went to to our museum and I saw how Dover used to be like 100 years ago, and we had a tavern, we had more like commercial area. I want to believe that it was a more active, smaller community, even if you had big properties. And I think that nowadays, the concept of space and character can live together. Like, I've watched lots of HGTV shows and things like that, where people restore or create multifamily houses without losing the external concept of the houses, and also without changing much how the town operates. I think there's creativity nowadays to accommodate some of those, perceived conflicts that we have. And I remember actually having a conversation with a 13 years old here from Dover who interviewed me when I was at the Warrant Committee about what could be done better in Dover. And for him, he also was concerned about like ability to interact more with friends and so on. Granted that back in the days he had not gone to the new community center, but he was excited with the possibilities that we would be able to have resources in town, even preserving the characteristics that we have. Meaning like Dover doesn't have a restaurant. Can we actually get a restaurant? It doesn't solve the housing issue. I'm just giving an example of how creativity can come to the table to find solutions in maybe in ways that we had not discussed before. Like we see so many houses that are 2 or 3 levels. Some of them, I think it wouldn't be a big deal to actually still preserve the characteristic, the charm that we have here in Dover, the rural aspect, but have maybe 2 or 3 smaller families living in those places.
Well, thank you for your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So John has raised his hand. Did somebody beat me to it? Admitting him? I guess not.
Looks like it got lowered. John, if you want to raise your hand again.
Okay. So, so you should be able to speak.
Judy, can you hear me now?
Yep, sure
Yep.
can. Thank you.
So, Judy, thank you very much. John Jeffries, and for the rest of the committee, for the people who are on the task force, thank you for the time and effort that you've put in. This is a very important topic for the town of Dover, one that is absolutely on the minds of a lot of our senior citizens and a lot of the people who live in the residential area of the village. Many of the structural problems that you face begin with meetings like this tonight. You're putting in tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort, and the communication via webinar is horrible. It does not allow for interactivity. It doesn't allow for a web chat. It doesn't allow for any of the things that you need from a community standpoint to actually have the fabric of the community heard. It feels like you have a lecture series. The information is fabulous. The information is in depth. It is really important, but it's very, very difficult in this process of a webinar. Number one. Number two, Carol, question for you, for Carol Lisbon. I thought we did adopt the Community Preservation Act. You don't have to answer this right away. And then also a question for Carol is, a lot of the things that the first two people brought up, specifically Sierra with water and your last person that you were speaking with regards to accommodations, we can make accommodations for accessory dwelling units. We have the ability to do that. What specifically are you thinking, Carol, that can be done to accommodate some of these accommodations that the last speaker and as a follow-up and I are asking? And then finally, with regards to the center and a development, are you thinking, again, this is probably for Carol, are you thinking of changing the zoning to allow for the multi aspect that you will need to do those things? And I'll leave it there.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
sure can.
Okay.
You need
This is
to see
Carol
you.
Lisbon and
can
Simi. John, the CPA was not passed by Dover, and it was brought up once many years ago, and it has not been brought up again. But no, we are not part of the CPA. We have lost significant funds because of that, but we are not part of it. One of the purposes of this housing task force and the work being done by Barrett Consulting is to give us that toolbox that Robin's talked about in the beginning. And part of that toolbox will be looking at aspects that we think are viable. And then one of the issues implementing those priorities will be, how does zoning get impacted and do we need new zoning? So this is just the beginning of that process. But of course, implementing almost anything that would be recommended by Barrett Consulting would require some kind of zoning change because, as they also discussed just a few minutes ago, we have very restrictive zoning when it comes to that. Thank you.
And I think, Carol, just to add to what you said, that's why it's so important for us to hear from the community this evening and in our other community engagement forums. And as we said from the onset, this is one of many, and we will hold one in person for those people that want to attend as well. But we have found as a town that we do get higher participation when town citizens can participate via Zoom, even though it's not as nice as in person. But unfortunately, everybody seems to be very busy, and making a meeting in person seems to be more difficult. So it is one of the challenges that we face, and we do try and accommodate everyone. But thank you for your comments.
Other questions? John, you still have your hand up. Did we miss something? I think
No.
you have permission. Sorry.
No, I have nothing more to add at this time. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Thank you. Yep. Why don't we go on to the next question and see what people think? Can you give us some examples of housing maybe that you've seen in other communities, either near Dover or elsewhere, that you like, and tell us why. What did you like? What did you see that you liked? Any thoughts? I know you're not all in Dover all day. Maybe think about some other communities you've been in nearby.
So
Or
Sierra raised her hand.
I, Sierra, yes. And
Hi, I'd just like to reiterate what the speaker who was talking about maybe condoizing larger properties, larger homes had to say, because that seems like a great solution to the problem of housing being too expensive, and also to preserving the look and feel of Dover as we know it. And I like that happening in other communities. I'm thinking of Wellesley in particular, where there are some large homes that have been turned into condos. And I think that would be a great way to kill two birds. And that's all.
Thank you.
other thoughts?
We have a bashful group this evening. Oh, there's another hand up.
This is Simone again. It's just one thing that came to my head. I think I had mentioned this in some other meetings that I participated in the past, but for those of you who have seen or heard about the concept of the blue zones, where people consider that people live much longer than the average around the world, and there are 5 well-known blue zones in the world, even with some criticism about this kind of approach. But having said that, there was an experiment in the US, and I will Google to find where this was. But they basically adopted the same sort of approach that those blue zones have in this small town. And they actually saw very fast results in terms of overall quality of life of the and the strength of the community. And I don't know for sure if they had done some work focusing specifically on types of housing, but I was trying also to Google while someone else was talking here about like different areas in the US where there have been some sort of a more progressive approach to rural areas. And the long story short, they all revolve around building communities and making sure that there's sustainability involved, or even like broadband access, this kind of things. So I think we have most of the characteristics either to be a blue zone or also to investigate more some of these models. So someone, for example, like one of the things that I was reading about is a rural Vermont model, where they organize the residents around big issues, including renewable energy. That is one of the things that we want here, and particularly with the restrictions about water, is like, can we put our heads together around this kind of issue to see the opportunities to actually find the right housing style that would solve the problems without compromising the access to the natural resources that are so critical for us.
Thank you.
Judy, I just thought I'd add, because I think this is a great question, given there's multiple opportunities to participate, if people on this call don't have an answer of housing they've seen, maybe pay attention, look around when you visit family or friends or go to other communities. And when you do see something that you like or you think is a good fit, for Dover, maybe that could be shared at a future session.
That's a really good idea. Thank you very much. This meeting will make you all start looking around.
We hope.
in your travels and thinking about, I like or I don't like.
Right. That's the hope.
That's right. Tell us what you think is special about Dover today and what would be most important to you to preserve. Thoughts? What's special about your community to you? And what would you want to preserve? What's most important to you to preserve? Sarah.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but
all right.
I love the rural character, and I know that's important to a lot of other people. And having sort of a feeling of farminess, even though that's definitely dwindling these days. But a couple of years ago, there was a push to make it more difficult to keep farm animals and horses even. And there was a lot of pushback about that. People said they really valued the rural character. And that's something I really value too, and all the open space.
Other thoughts? So John makes a comment here. The visual open rural character with open space is always the most important. Let me see.
And then Amy has her hand up.
Yeah. There, Amy, you should be able to talk.
Okay. I'm gonna second Sierra. I don't think that'll be any surprise to anybody here. But I think the other thing that is really special about Dover is the wonderful network of trails that we have and how that enables people who walk and run and bike and ride to really get out and experience all that wonderful open space that we have, as opposed and they don't have to just stick to one property. They can move across acres and acres and make a nice big loop as opposed to having to retrace their steps all the time. And I think keeping that network open and not breaking it up by with development is important, or making sure that if there is development, that there are ways to get across the development from one open space to another. It really, benefits the development as well. Neighborhoods.
Yep. Agreed. So we have another comment, I think, in response to this question in the Q&A. The woodlands and opportunities to walk in them is invaluable. while we should countenance some of the multiple housing options proposed here, this should be done in the context of preserving these invaluable assets. So thank you for that comment. Does anybody else want to address this special about Dover, what should be preserved? Because the next question is the sort of flip side of that is what should be changed? What do you think would be changed that would make sense for Dover? It might make Dover an even better place to live than it is now. Chris. Chris should be able to speak.
Yes, hi, Chris Verney here. Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to speak tonight and for you all and all your work that goes into putting on the presentation this evening. And those who come, it's a lot of work and it's it's a hard job. To answer your question, I think we're all agree that everyone loves the open space and maintaining the trails and the things that make Dover are tantamount to the process here. And we think about what should change. I mean, for me, I think the center of town is a lost opportunity, and I think it probably could be re-envisioned to solve some of the concerns that folks have, particularly in terms of an aging population that might want to stay in town, to have housing that's amenable to aging in place, et cetera. And there was a planning board session 2 or 3 years ago where people were thinking about what that vision of the center of town should be. And I think, having this task force run its course definitely should not be in isolation with regard to those broader aspects of the master plan and think about the center of town. And that's where, I would encourage this task force to kind of take that broader role. And as you reimagine the center of town, think about how housing could be incorporated into a center of town that would be more welcoming as opposed to something that's just a cause for a traffic jam for nothing to look at except for the new Carroll Center. But when you think about having the zoning be amenable to that and having some smaller lot sizes, if you will, in the center of town, much like Dover Farms, I think there's ways of doing that in a beautiful way. And you think about like Marblehead, the historic village there, or Nantucket Village or Marion Village, where I maintain a home. It's all smaller lots, but done very tastefully, and is also more amenable to walking and shops and even a restaurant or two.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Sierra, I think Sierra has talking privileges now. Am I right?
Right.
Yes.
So, right.
Thank you. I would like to see some kind of historic district so that we can really count on having the character of the town preserved.
Are you thinking of a historic district in a particular location or locations?
Probably start with Main Street, which was the original center of town, and still has a lot of historic buildings on it. Farm Street, I think, also is worthy of preservation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you. And now we have.
That's Simone. I want to just echo Chris' comments. And I thought that he gave actually great examples of communities that have a more live center and more activities or opportunities for people to get together and more resources available to the communities, even if small communities. We also own a place in Marion near the Cape. And we actually ended up buying a place there exactly because it was, a place with walk distance to have, to grab a coffee, to have dinner, even walk to the beach. It's very easy to get together in a place like that. The community center is a great addition to what we have here, but I think that we still need to get, more resources, maybe like, a small pharmacy, a place that you can have, I don't know, maybe a little shop to, you have like a last minute party. We all have to leave the town to get something if we want to bring a gift. It's tiny little things that would, in my view, add some charm to Dover and really increase the opportunities to build a stronger community.
Thank you. Maybe let's hop to the last question here. What do you appreciate from other communities that you wish you had in Dover? Sort of got a little bit of hint of that from the last commenter, but something you wish you had in Dover that you don't have now. Yes. Okay, here we go again.
Yeah, definitely a restaurant. God knows today would be a great day to find a restaurant here to go. We probably have spent more money on delivery, since we moved to Dover than on anything else. But it's also like a place where you can meet people that otherwise you wouldn't have a chance to meet,
Right.
Here. As someone who moved to Dover after my kids were already out of school, it was extremely difficult to get to know people here. Like if you don't have kids in school, it's very lucky if you find someone walking around that you engage in a conversation and you actually can follow up and meet in different places.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? John?
Judy, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Sorry.
Just two quick comments with regards to a restaurant in Dover. I've been an owner in a restaurant in Wellesley for 20 some years and an owner of 7 others with my sister. And it is virtually impossible to have a restaurant in Dover. One of the things that happened recently that has been a detriment to the only place you can get food in Dover right now, which is the Dover Market, is the townhouse going to a 4-day work week. That was damaging beyond belief to the only business in town that serves any food at all, and that's the Dover Market. The owner, proprietor, he is barely surviving in a town that doesn't have any services. So you have limited parking. The water system in the center of town is ancient. It breaks all the time. The septic system in any place that would provide food is incompatible with a restaurant. So you have structural insufficiencies throughout the center of Dover that will never support a restaurant that you do have in towns like Wellesley, Medfield, Westwood, Needham, et cetera, et cetera. So
Good point.
if the town is serious about this, which I hope it is, it has to dramatically, as one of the other gentlemen said, rethink or reimagine the town center. That starts with infrastructure. You have no parking, no water, no sewerage, nothing that can support any things that you've just brought up. Elderly housing, community housing, restaurants, shops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, will never happen. And the people that are sitting next to you in this meeting know that I have the experience on both sides of this problem as a selectman and as an owner as a business. So it will never happen until you get serious about changing the infrastructure in the town. And as Sierra said, if you go down that path, it is going to be incompatible with what other people want. The gentleman and the woman from Marion, I've been going to Marion my whole life. It was very difficult to get Marion to be the way Marion is right now. And a lot of it had to do with Tabor Academy. As that grew, so did the town center.
Oh, it's true. Thank you. Any other comments on this question? I think not. Perhaps we'll just sort of move on then to the next slide, JC. Next steps?
Yeah.
This is your turn.
Yeah. So yeah, we're now just wrapping up this community forum. So thank you everyone who shared their thoughts. As we've been talking about, this is the one of many engagements, and there'll be multiple avenues for you to share your thoughts on housing. So please visit our website on the screen here. I will also share it on chat. And please keep an eye out for future community events that we'll have in Dover. And I'll pass it off to Melissa if you want to do any closing remarks.
Thank you, Jean-Charles, and thank you for everybody for attending this evening. We can't emphasize the importance of public comment and public input. This is just one opportunity to share that. I would encourage people to visit the website. Everything is linked up to the special project website. My information is also all over the website. I work here in the townhouse 4 days a week, available to discuss with folks, their questions, their comments. If you'd like to email me, whatever the format that is comfortable for you and works for you, works for us as well here in Dover. Looking forward to more input as we continue. And please keep an eye out on our website, email blasts, and so forth. We're going to be continuing to advertise these events. And the most important thing that would really help us is please share your experience with your friends, neighbors, and relatives in Dover from this evening. We had made some comments earlier, takeaways, what you've learned. Again, the more folks that we can get to attend the meetings and the more input, the better the outcome will be for the community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending, and keep an eye open on the website, and we look forward to your comments when you drive around and start noticing multifamily developments that you may like in Dover. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.